If you've been on BookTube for more than 5 seconds, you've probably not only seen a top 10 fantasy series of all time video, you've probably seen at least a dozen. And something you may have noticed is that all of them look exactly the same. Here, I'll prove it. They all probably look something along the lines of Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire, The Cosmere, First Law, Malazan, Realm of the Underlings, Wheel of Time, Harry Potter, King Killer, Discworld, with maybe the occasional Greenbone Saga, Ryan Cahill series, Dresden Files, Gentleman Bastards, or one of the two John Gwynns mixed in there. Or maybe even a science fantasy like Dune or Sun Eater as well. Now that's only 17 series, and out of those 17 series, I would bet that most of the top 10 fantasy series of all time lists that you've watched have probably at least 5 to 7 of those books on there, or book series on there, with the other 3 to 5 being something outside of that list. And I think I'm probably being at least a little bit generous with those numbers. But before anybody gets the wrong impression, I want to make very clear that I am not an outlier to this. Like, I haven't made my top 10 fantasy series of all time video yet, but off the top of my head, probably at least 5 of those series fall into my top 10 category. So this video is not to talk smack about top 10 fantasy series videos or the people creating the lists that look exactly the same. Quite the contrary. I'm going to dive into and explain why they all look the same. Why out of the thousands of series out there are the same dozen plus a few extra on every single list. And I'm actually going to be a little bit more controversial than that by explaining why I think it's a good thing that a lot of us share the same favorite fantasy series of all time. Why it's a good thing most of our top 10 lists are similar. But first, I'm going to give you a few theories, and then I'll tell you the actual reason, the real reason why so many of our top 10 lists look exactly the same. And the first theory is one that I don't think is the primary driving factor, but is a factor for sure. And that is the echo chambers created by influencers such as booktubers. And this theory essentially boils down to the fact that the online community repeatedly reinforces the same books and series because of things like the algorithm, influencer culture, and groupthink all motivates us to do so. And like I said, I do think this is a real thing that actually happens. I just don't think it's the primary driver of our discussion. The YouTube algorithm really does promote videos similar to those that the user has already watched that essentially keeps them in this loop of familiar content. So if a viewer watches a video about a popular fantasy book, they are going to be recommended other videos on it, which kind of encourages creators to make similar content to ride that algorithm wave. And prominent booktubers can really impact this. It only takes a few popular booktubers to give a book momentum and heavily influence opinion on the book. Don't even get me started about groupthink on BookTube, because if you don't know what groupthink is, it's like this natural phenomenon that happens when groups form, and it's when a group starts to prioritize consensus or conformity over truth or critical thinking. And a big problem with groupthink is that it often results in backlash against dissenting opinions or ideas, even if the opinions or ideas are valid and true. Which of course causes the echo chambers that I was talking about, because it can cause creators to fear backlash when expressing opinions outside of the creator consensus, or even go against the algorithm, which affects monetization. My last video, for example, it's a book about showing underrated hidden gems, but I also go into the popular overrated books and why I think they're overrated. There are several comments out there just trashing my video because they don't want to see me point out the flaws in the overrated books. They just want to see me highlight the underrated books. They view me negatively, or my opinions as negative, because I'm giving my honest, true opinion about the books I find overrated. Another person even flagged my account for opinions on a few books being misleading because I disagreed with them. Now, I'm a horrible booktuber, so I don't care. I'm just going to say it, my opinion's even louder. But for a creator that relies on BookTube as their only source of income, it's super easy to see how the drive to conform would be strong. So moving on from the echo chamber explanation, we get into the movie and TV adaptation explanation. And this one won't nearly be as long as the echo chamber one, especially because I think there's a lot less truth to this one, but essentially boils down to the fact that movie and TV adaptations of books or book series often make them more popular. And A Song of Ice and Fire is actually a really good example of this. It's a series that started in the 90s and sold about 12 million-ish copies before the first season of the TV show came out. But that very first year the TV show came out, it sold 9 million copies just that year. So adaptations can definitely help a well-written book make it into the limelight and sell copies and make it popular. But as you can see from that list of books I gave, there's only a few that actually have successful TV series or movie adaptations. So I think this one's a lot less applicable to being the overall reason why we all share the same few favorite fantasy series. All right, the last, and in my opinion, the most important explanation why we all see the same few book series repeated over and over and over again has to do with this chart. This is a standard bell curve displaying normal distributions, and it's important because it does an extremely good job of describing why we repeatedly see the same few books. Essentially, much of nature follows this kind of pattern. So things like height and IQ all follow this type of distribution. And what this shows is that 68% of data points are likely to fall within one standard deviation of average. So if we're applying this to published books, then 68% of all published books are likely to be of average quality, even if that average is amazing. Then as we move further away from average, the likelihood of breaking into that next standard deviation is a lot harder to do. So a book has to be a lot better to break into that next category, which if we look one standard deviation over from average, I would say the next one is slightly above average. So this should be only about 13.5% of all published books should be in that above average category. Then in the category above that, only 2%. And above that, maybe 1.14%. And I think this is the real key that explains why most of us kind of rate the same few books as the greatest of all time over and over and over again. It's because the greatest books of all time are that much better and that fewer in number. Either that or they have to have impacted multiple generations of people to the same degree in a way that only 2% or 0.14% of things ever will. So Harry Potter, for example, it doesn't have to be the fact that this book is the most well-written book of all time, that it's that much better written. But the fact that this series was able to touch that many people, that it was able to be such a huge part of people's childhoods, that they were able to go through this series in every single season of our lives, first with the books, then with the movies. It created an impact that few book series will ever make in such a large population. In reality, I think there's a ton of reasons why so many of our favorites are the same. But like I said, I do not think this is a bad thing. I do think it's a good thing that so many of us share the same favorite series. It's essentially a piece of shared culture among us, something that's increasingly disappearing in a world that's becoming more and more virtual and more divisive. Like this little piece of shared culture we have can create a sense of belonging and connection. It can create trust. It can create understanding, and it helps us communicate with each other more effectively. So to conclude this video, the 3 things I want you to take away from this video is, number 1, many top 10 fantasy videos have the exact same few books on them. 2, this phenomenon is a good thing that creates a small piece of shared culture in a world of divisiveness. And 3, while factors like echo chambers and screen adaptations can influence a book's popularity, the real reason most books are repeatedly on a lot of people's top 10 list is because they're that much better than everything else out there. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe to help with the channel.